Women like me simply can't be with men like him, I kept explaining to my friend. You see, he's from another world, a world of Mercedes, Rolex watches, yachts, and luxury villas. But when he looks at me, I forget that we're different. I forget that I have $100 in my pocket, and he has billions in his accounts. I forget that he's 10 years younger because he's more mature than any man I've ever met before him. I was so tired of going on dates, terrified to admit that I was a single mom. I'm just a woman who wants to love and be loved. Subscribe to our channel if you're listening to this story. Write in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever witnessed similar stories. I wasn't planning to fall in love. God, I didn't even believe in love anymore. Not after a divorce that left me with 2 teenagers, a mortgage, and an uncanny ability to fake a smile at PTA meetings. But life has this annoying habit of laughing at our plans. It all started on a rainy Tuesday morning when I walked into Haven Foods corporate headquarters. My best friend Megan had forwarded me a job posting for an assistant manager position in their flagship supermarket. The pay was decent, the benefits good, and I desperately needed both. I was wearing my serious woman uniform, navy blazer, white blouse, heels that made me feel powerful and miserable at the same time. My hair was tied in a low ponytail, my resume trembling slightly in my hand. I didn't know that the moment I stepped into that sleek glass building, I was about to meet the man who would turn my quiet, predictable world upside down. When the receptionist finally called my name, I walked into a massive office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of downtown. And there he was. Ethan Hale. I knew his name before he said a word. The billionaire owner of Haven Foods. The kind of man you read about in business magazines while waiting at the dentist's office. He was 10 years younger than me, maybe early 30s, but carried himself like he'd been running the world since birth. Ms. Parker, right? His voice was smooth, deep, with just enough warmth to make my knees feel unreliable. Yes, I said, trying not to notice the way his perfectly tailored suit hugged his broad shoulders. I expected a standard interview with some HR rep, not the actual CEO. I like to personally meet potential managers, he explained, leaning back in his chair. People are the heartbeat of this company. I remember thinking, yeah, and I'm sure you give this heartfelt speech to every applicant. The interview went smoothly, or at least I thought it did. I answered his questions, kept my tone professional, and ignored the way his piercing gray eyes seemed to linger on my face longer than necessary. I left convinced that, to him, I was just another resume in a pile. 2 days later, I got the call. I got the job. And that's when things got complicated. The first few weeks at Haven Foods were a blur of new systems, training sessions, and endless coffee runs. Ethan was always around, though, walking through the store, chatting casually with employees, shaking hands like some kind of modern-day royalty. He treated everyone kindly. Which is why, when he stopped by my department one afternoon, leaning against the doorframe with that easy grin, I told myself not to overthink it. "How's the transition going?" he asked. "Good. Busy. Trying not to drown." He chuckled. "Don't worry, you're doing great. I've heard nothing but good things." And then he left. Just like that. No lingering looks, no hidden meaning. I reminded myself 100 times that day, he treats everyone like this. Don't make it something it's not. A week later, he proved me wrong. "Coffee?" he asked casually one evening as I was finishing up paperwork in the break room. I looked up, startled. "Me?" "Yes, you." He smiled, tilting his head slightly. "Unless you're allergic to caffeine, in which case we can negotiate tea." I hesitated. "I have 2 kids." He didn't flinch. "So?" "I like coffee, not custody." That made me laugh despite myself. And against my better judgment, I said yes. We met at a little cafe 2 blocks away. It wasn't a date, at least not officially, but the way his eyes softened when I spoke and the way his laughter lingered in the air made it feel like one. When we said goodbye, he leaned in and kissed my cheek. Just a brush of lips, barely there. But it stayed with me for hours afterward, the warmth of it, the sudden rush in my chest. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment over and over. I didn't want him. He was younger, richer, and lived in a world I had no business entering. But when I woke up the next morning, the memory of his touch was still there, haunting and sweet. I told myself to stay grounded. To protect my heart. But I had no idea what was coming. Because when you fall for a man like Ethan Hale, nothing stays simple for long. If there's one thing no one warns you about when you fall for a man like Ethan Hale, it's how quietly it begins. No fireworks. No movie score crescendo. Just little moments. A laugh over coffee. A glance across the store. A casual touch on my arm that left me thinking about it all night. And then came the evening that changed everything. It was a Thursday, the day from hell. My assistant called in sick, an entire delivery shipment was delayed, and 2 customers almost started a fistfight over organic avocados. By the time my shift ended, I was ready to crawl into bed and hide from the world. I was locking up my office when I heard a voice behind me. Tough day? I turned and there he was, leaning against the doorway like he'd been sculpted just to test my self-control. You have no idea, I muttered. Come on, he said, jingling his car keys. Let me buy you dinner. I hesitated, my stomach twisting. Ethan, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because you're 10 years younger than me. Because you're a billionaire and I'm a single mom drowning in bills. Because I don't want you. I just don't think it's smart, I finally said. He smiled, that maddening, confident smile. One dinner, Parker. That's all I'm asking. If you hate it, I'll never ask again. Against every ounce of common sense in my body, I nodded. We ended up at a quiet Italian restaurant tucked away on a side street downtown. Candlelight flickered between us, soft jazz played in the background, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's exhausted mom. I felt like me. You're different, Ethan said, swirling the wine in his glass. Different how? You don't care who I am. I laughed. Should I? Most people do, he said simply. They want something from me. Money. Connections. Access. You don't. That's because I'm too busy wanting 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, I teased, and he chuckled, leaning back, studying me like I was some rare painting he couldn't figure out. When he dropped me off at my house later that night, I reached for the door handle, trying to act casual, but my heart was hammering. Thank you for dinner, I said softly. He nodded. Thank you for saying yes. And then, silence. That kind of silence where everything hangs in the air, charged and fragile. He leaned in. Slowly. Carefully. Giving me every second to pull away. I didn't. When his lips touched mine, it was gentle at first, a question, not an answer. But then something shifted, and his hand slid up to cradle my jaw, deepening the kiss until I forgot how to breathe. When we finally broke apart, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. Good night, Parker, he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. I nodded, too stunned to speak. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his lips on mine again. I woke up thinking about him. Fell asleep thinking about him. And yet, despite everything, I kept my guard up. I had to. I hadn't told him about Lily and Noah yet, my teenagers, my entire world. I was terrified that once I did, he'd look at me differently. Like I was baggage he didn't want to carry. But Ethan, he kept showing up. Lunch breaks. Coffee runs. Random texts that made me laugh at my desk. He made space for me in his impossibly busy life, and I started to believe, just a little, that maybe, somehow, this could work. Then, out of nowhere, he stopped. One day he was everywhere. The next, he was nowhere. No texts. No calls. Barely even a hello when we crossed paths at work. I told myself I was imagining it. That he was just busy. But when I saw him one evening at a rooftop bar across from our store, dressed in his sharpest suit, smiling at a tall blonde socialite from his world, something inside me cracked. I went home that night, crawled into bed next to my sleeping kids, and reminded myself why I had walls in the first place. Because men like Ethan Hale don't fall for women like me. Or at least, that's what I thought. For the next 2 weeks, I pretended I didn't care. I mastered the art of polite indifference, short greetings, casual smiles, nothing more. If he noticed, he didn't say a word. But I could feel him watching me sometimes, like a weight at the edge of my vision. It didn't matter. I had 2 teenagers, a demanding job, and zero energy for men who played games. At least, that's what I told myself. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the kids were asleep, I'd close my eyes and replay the way he'd kissed me outside my house. I'd remember his hand on my jaw, the sound of his breath, the taste of his wine. And then I'd remember the blonde on the rooftop. That was when the ache started, low, dull, and constant. One evening after work, Megan showed up at my house uninvited with takeout and wine. Best friends can sense heartbreak even when you refuse to admit it. "Spill it," she demanded, popping open a bottle. "There's nothing to spill. Please. I saw your face when I mentioned Ethan's name earlier." "What happened?" I hesitated, swirling my glass. "We kissed. A few times. Then he disappeared. And now he's dating his kind of people." Megan rolled her eyes. "His kind of people? What does that even mean?" "You know what I mean. Models. Heiresses. Women who don't bring 2 teenagers and a minivan into the relationship." She leaned across the table, her voice soft. "You think you're not enough for him?" I stared at my glass, unable to answer. 2 days later, he cornered me. It was after closing, the store quiet, the hum of the refrigeration units the only sound. I was finishing up reports when the office door clicked shut behind me. I turned, and there he was. "Ethan," I said cautiously. "Do you need something? You've been avoiding me." I crossed my arms. "I've been busy." He stepped closer, and I hated the way my pulse betrayed me. "Parker." His voice was low, rough. "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked, trying to sound cold. "For disappearing. For that night you saw me with Claire." Ah, the blonde had a name. Of course she did. "You don't owe me an explanation," I said flatly, turning back to my desk. He didn't move. "I wasn't with her," he said softly. "Not like that. I thought I wanted something simple, someone from my world. But it didn't feel right." I looked up sharply. His eyes were on me, unguarded in a way I'd never seen before. "It scared me," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "How fast I was falling for you. It's not supposed to be like this." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with everything unspoken: desire, fear, longing. "You don't get it, Ethan," I said finally, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "I have 2 kids. A mortgage. A messy, complicated life. You deserve someone who can give you more than late-night takeout and secondhand exhaustion." He stepped closer until I could feel his warmth. "Don't tell me what I deserve," he said quietly. "I want you, Parker." My breath caught. I hated him for saying it. Hated him for making me want to believe it. But before I could reply, he reached out and brushed his fingers over mine, so lightly it felt like a promise and a warning all at once. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart hammering as Ethan's words played on repeat in my mind. "I want you, Parker." I thought about the way his hand had lingered on mine, the softness in his eyes, the vulnerability in his voice. I also thought about my kids. Lily was 15, navigating high school drama like it was a battlefield. Noah was 13, sarcastic and sweet in equal measure. They'd been through enough already, the divorce, the endless moves, the disappointment of a father who showed up only when it suited him. I couldn't let Ethan into their world. Not yet. Not until I was sure. But then, a week later, Lily and Noah both came down with the flu, the kind that leaves you drenched in sweat and too weak to move. I took 3 days off work, barely sleeping, shuffling between their bedrooms with thermometers and cold compresses. On the 3rd day, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there. He held a bag in one hand, a thermos in the other. "I heard," he said simply. "I brought broth. And medicine." I should have told him to leave. I should have drawn the line, protected the fragile walls I'd built. But instead, I stepped aside and let him in. And that was the moment everything began to change. I hadn't seen Ethan outside of work for almost a week when he showed up at my door with broth, medicine, and that infuriating, heart-melting smile. I wasn't ready for it. "How did you even know they were sick?" I asked, stepping aside as he walked in. "Megan," he said simply, setting the bag on the counter. "She was worried about you." I made a mental note to strangle Megan later. Ethan moved around my tiny kitchen like he belonged there, unpacking containers of chicken soup, tea, and enough over-the-counter meds to stock a pharmacy. "You didn't have to do this," I said quietly. "I wanted to," he replied, his voice soft but steady. "You've been taking care of everyone else. Let someone take care of you for once." And just like that, my carefully guarded walls cracked a little more. For the next 2 hours, he stayed. He made sure the kids took their medicine, joked with Noah about missing school, and even coaxed a weak smile out of Lily, who had perfected the art of hating everyone over the age of 25. Watching him with them did something to me I couldn't explain. Ethan Hale, billionaire, playboy, tabloid magnate, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, patiently explaining to my feverish son how electrolytes work. It shouldn't have made sense. But somehow, it did. When the kids were finally asleep, we ended up in the kitchen, standing across from each other with mugs of tea. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was charged, humming with everything we weren't saying. "You didn't have to come," I said again, softer this time. "I know," he said, his eyes locking on mine. "But I wanted to." Something about the way he said it made my breath hitch. "Ethan." I started, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between us. "You keep trying to push me away," he said quietly. "Why?" "Because this." I gestured between us, frustrated. "This isn't supposed to happen. You're 10 years younger than me. You're rich, Ethan. You live in a completely different world." He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was the only thing worth figuring out. "And yet I'm standing here. In your kitchen. Making tea while your kids sleep upstairs." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. "You don't understand," I whispered. "Then make me understand." The air between us grew heavier, and for a moment, I thought he was going to kiss me right there. His hand brushed against mine on the counter, and the spark that shot through me was so strong it left me dizzy. But then, as if remembering himself, he stepped back. "Not like this," he murmured, running a hand through his hair. "You're exhausted. They need you. You need rest." And just like that, he left, leaving me leaning against the counter, breathless and shaking. After that night, something shifted. Ethan started coming by more often, always with some excuse. Dropping off groceries. Bringing movies for Noah. Asking Lily about her art projects. The kids liked him. A lot. And that terrified me more than anything. Because letting him into my life was one thing. Letting him into theirs? That was dangerous. So I pulled back. I started refusing his calls, kept our conversations at work short and professional. I convinced myself it was better this way, safer, simpler. But Ethan Hale has never been the kind of man who gives up easily. One Friday night, after I'd put the kids to bed, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, he was standing there in the rain, hands shoved in his pockets, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice low, almost hoarse. I crossed my arms, trying to ignore the way my chest tightened at the sight of him. "I told you, Ethan. It's complicated." "Then let it be complicated," he said fiercely, stepping closer. "I can handle complicated. What I can't handle is watching you run every time this gets real." My throat tightened, words tangled somewhere between fear and longing. "You scare me," I admitted finally, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. "The way I feel about you, it scares me." For a moment, he just stared at me, rain dripping from his lashes, his jaw clenched. Then he reached up, gently cupping my face in his hands. "You think I'm not scared too?" he whispered. "You think I've ever felt like this before?" And before I could reply, he kissed me. This kiss wasn't tentative, wasn't a question. It was an answer. And God help me, I kissed him back like I'd been waiting my whole life. After that night, that kiss, there was no going back. I tried. God knows I tried. I told myself to slow down, to be cautious, to think of the kids first. But Ethan had a way of breaking through every wall I'd built. We started seeing each other, quietly at first. Coffee before work. Late night walks after the kids were asleep. Sometimes he'd stop by with takeout and a bottle of wine, and we'd sit on the porch talking for hours, the rest of the world fading away. But as much as I wanted him, I couldn't shake the gnawing fear in my chest. Because falling for Ethan Hale didn't just feel risky. It felt impossible. One evening, we were curled up on my couch, the TV playing some movie neither of us was watching, when he traced his fingers lightly over my hand. "Parker," he said softly. "Move in with me." I froze. "What?" "Not right away," he clarified quickly. I want you and the kids with me. My house is huge. There's space for everyone. You wouldn't have to worry about bills, or..." I pulled my hand away, my voice sharper than I intended. "Ethan, stop." He blinked, caught off guard. "What did I say?" "You can't just swoop in and fix everything. That's not how this works." "I'm not trying to fix you," he said quietly, his jaw tight. "I'm trying to build something with you." I shook my head, my chest aching. "You don't get it. My life is messy. My kids have been through enough. I can't just uproot them because you feel something right now." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "This isn't just a feeling." But I couldn't let myself believe him. Not yet. The next few days were tense. I avoided him again, afraid of what moving too fast would do, to me, to the kids, to us. And then Megan sent me a picture. It was Ethan. At a charity gala. Standing next to Claire, the blonde from the rooftop. They were smiling for the cameras, champagne flutes in hand, looking every inch the perfect couple. My stomach dropped. I didn't call him. Didn't text him. Didn't ask for an explanation. I just folded into myself. 2 nights later, there was another knock on my door. I almost didn't open it. But when I did, he was standing there again, no tuxedo this time, no cameras, just Ethan, his tie undone and his expression unreadable. "You saw the photos," he said quietly. I didn't reply. "It was business," he continued, stepping inside without asking. "A sponsorship deal. She means nothing to me." "She doesn't look like nothing," I snapped before I could stop myself. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "Parker," he said softly, "don't do this. Don't shut me out over something that isn't real." "Maybe it's not real to you," I whispered, "but it's real to me. I'm not built for this. For your world. For the gossip, the cameras, the perfect women in designer gowns." Ethan's jaw tightened, frustration flashing in his eyes. "You think I care about any of that? You should, I shot back. Because it's your life. It's not mine. We stood there in silence, both breathing hard, both too stubborn to take the first step. Finally, he ran a hand through his hair, his voice low and rough. Then tell me to walk away, he said. Look me in the eye and tell me you don't want me, and I'll go. Right now. I opened my mouth. The words should have come easily. They didn't. Because I did want him. So much it terrified me. So I stayed silent. And Ethan smiled. Just a little. That's what I thought, he murmured, before leaning down and kissing me like he was claiming something he'd already decided was his. That night, we didn't stop at kissing. And the next morning, when I woke up tangled in his arms, sunlight spilling across my bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Wanted. Seen. But even as I lay there, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing, a voice in the back of my head whispered a warning. This is real. And real things can break you. It had been 3 days since Ethan and I had crossed that invisible line, and everything felt different. He texted me in the mornings now, little messages like coffee or tea today, or don't skip breakfast, Parker. It was sweet. Too sweet. And it scared the hell out of me. Because if there's one thing life had taught me, it's that when something feels too good to be true, it usually is. I didn't tell the kids about Ethan. Not yet. They were 15 and 13, old enough to notice, old enough to judge, old enough to get hurt if this ended badly. But then both of them came down with the flu again. Fever, chills, the whole 9 yards. I called in sick, brewed every kind of tea we had in the pantry, and tried to keep up with their demands while juggling emails from work. Around 7 in the evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Ethan, holding a bag in one hand and a thermos in the other. I heard, he said simply, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Inside the bag were 3 boxes of medication, electrolyte drinks, and 2 containers of homemade chicken broth. You made this? I blinked. He shrugged, setting everything on the counter. I called my mom. She still makes the best soup in Boston. I stared at him, my throat tight. No one had ever shown up like this for me before. The kids were skeptical at first. Ethan wasn't exactly subtle, tall, ridiculously handsome, wearing a cashmere sweater like it was casual. But then he knelt next to Emma, who was bundled up in a blanket burrito, and asked, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how miserable are you right now? She sniffled. 11. He grinned. Perfect. That means the soup will taste like magic. By the end of the night, he had both my teenagers laughing at his ridiculous jokes and sipping broth like it was a miracle cure. And me? I stood in the doorway, watching him move through my kitchen like he belonged there, and something inside me cracked open. A week later, when the kids were better, Ethan invited us all over to his place. I almost said no. His world still terrified me, the glass walls, the ocean view, the polished floors that probably cost more than my entire annual salary. But when we got there, he surprised me. He'd set up a massive blanket fort in his living room, complete with string lights and bowls of popcorn. Emma's eyes went wide. This is epic. Ethan winked. Thought we'd start with movie night. No pressure. No fancy stuff. For the first time, I saw my kids relax around him. And I relaxed, too. After they fell asleep under the blanket fort, we stepped out onto his balcony. The city glittered beneath us, 1,000 tiny lights against the night sky. Ethan leaned against the railing, his voice low. You know, I don't do this. I frowned. Do what? This, he said, gesturing toward the fort inside. Movie nights. Chicken broth. Meeting teenagers. My friends think I've lost my mind. Maybe you have, I teased softly. He turned to me then, his gaze steady. Or maybe I finally found it. Something in his voice made my chest tighten. Parker, he continued, I know this is fast. I know you're scared. Hell, I'm scared, too. But I can't. I can't imagine my life without you in it. Without them in it. I swallowed hard, the air suddenly thick between us. And I don't want you juggling bills or worrying about rent or choosing between work and your kids anymore, he said. Come here. Move in with me. All of you. I shook my head instinctively. Ethan, He stepped closer, cupping my face in his hands, his voice fierce and quiet. This isn't pity. It's not convenience. It's love. I'm in love with you, Parker. And I'm all in. Tell me you feel the same, and we'll figure out the rest. For a moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Then I whispered, I do. And when he kissed me, the city disappeared, the fears disappeared, and all that was left was the certainty that for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. 2 months later, we moved into Ethan's house. It wasn't seamless, there were adjustments, awkward mornings, and the chaos of merging lives. But there was laughter, too. And warmth. And love. One night, I found Emma curled up on the couch with Ethan, both of them asleep halfway through a Marvel movie. My son had taken to calling him without prompting. I stood there, watching them, and realized something. Home wasn't a place. It was this. This messy, beautiful, unexpected second chance. And somehow, it was ours. Now, Ethan and I have 2 children together, and he adopted my kids, they call him Dad. When I look at our family photos, I still can't believe we made it. He hides me from the paparazzi but buys me the most expensive dress for the annual charity ball, where our family donates hundreds of thousands of dollars. He's used to making decisions on his own, but he always asks me what I think, about everything, about every step he takes. And I think, I love you, Ethan. Because you made me believe in fairy tales. You made me believe in our love.